Table number 5, what were your topics?
We had leadership training and building capital, and they kind of morphed together. Our table had tremendous diversity, and so I'm going to start with building capital. The first suggestion that we have is that we work with the city to define meaning of what communities are and neighborhoods are, because it's geographic, it's identity, it's virtual, and then to do what we call asset mapping, and that is to work with people to figure out what is important in their communities, because we found out around the table as we talked that there's a lot of diversity about what's considered an asset in a specific area and what's not. And to involve individuals, churches, schools, businesses, identify gaps. For example, when the Segovia Candy Company closed in the west side, there wasn't a lot of outcry about that, and asset mapping could figure out ways to do that. A second was social entrepreneurship, and that is to give grants, small grants. That was something that Francine talked about, to groups, but to focus on giving them to indigenous groups in communities, because often grants are given to already existing groups, and the people that don't have power don't have opportunities to get that. And then they could focus on neighborhood efforts, fitness, health, education, business, various kinds of things in their communities. The third idea, which we really got excited about, was to develop what we called a translation corps. And as we talked, we identified the fact that there are a lot of cultural issues in each neighborhood and community across the city, but increasingly we are becoming a Spanish-speaking community, and that there are a lot of entities where people don't speak Spanish. And so we thought about training individuals, starting maybe with high school students, to do translation of documents and also for people, but across the city, and then getting people involved in that, so you also could be bridging across communities then. People in various parts of San Antonio who don't know a lot about the west side, for example, would learn about some of the kinds of issues going on. People who don't know a lot about Alamo Heights might learn about them. So we thought that that might be a way to create a service, but also help people understand what some of the different issues were. For leadership training, we talked about identifying ombudspeople in neighborhoods, building on a concept that the military has, and then providing special training for those ombudspeople who could work within their neighborhoods to identify things like, I've got a dead animal on my street and I don't have a clue what to do about it. I don't know what kind of ways to get my street fixed, or I've got domestic violence going on and I don't know who to call. Those ombudspeople then probably can move up within the power structure and become mayors or governors or whatever. We also talked about...
Would you headline that again, just so we've got it?
Oh, sorry. Ombudspeople? Ombudsperson, you've got that?
Ombudspeople.
Okay. The second one was to tap into already existing organizations, the Boy Scouts, other youth groups, churches, schools, and providing leadership training to them, maybe creating several leadership academies that people could get training in to help identify emerging leaders, but also, again, to focus on people who aren't part of an already existing structure, to go out in communities and identify potential leaders, because there are a lot of people out there who aren't part of anything. And then the third was to have an increased emphasis on volunteerism. We liked the idea and supported the idea of having some kind of a central place where you could find out where you could volunteer, but then again, promoting the importance of volunteerism from elementary school on up. So, is there anything on this?
I'd like to add on an emphasis on identifying leaders. It wasn't on volunteerism, but on identifying leaders. It wasn't only the identification, but the actual support structure for those individuals, because one currently doesn't exist. Either you have to be kind of a legitimate entity recognized by the city, or you have to fall into a nonprofit that already exists. And we're looking at developing completely new leaders that don't need to be attached to either one. So it's identifying individuals and us offering support for them.
All right, table number 6. What were your categories?
Yes, at our table, which was facilitated by Ivy Taylor, she had to leave, so one of our members, well, me, is doing this presentation. We had leadership training and building community capital. And what our table came up with is capitalizing on existing leadership programs by making them action-oriented. We felt that a lot of leadership trainings are out there, but nobody really in the training curriculum itself engages them in any kind of action results or product. We felt that this would produce a concrete project that is relevant to the community, perhaps maybe going back to their own neighborhoods or their own blocks to try to identify and engage residents in issues that mean something to them. We felt that residents actually move when it's of interest to them. Everybody's got a different topic that motivates them. The second is engaging young people. We happen to have a 14-year-old with us here, with one of our AARP members from Westside San Antonio that came with us today. And he suggested engaging young people by providing more opportunities for leadership training for kids and encouraging young people to engage their parents. So, and that was more school-based. The third was expanding existing City of San Antonio municipal leadership institutes to train a broader range of individuals, including neighborhood associations, leaders. On the building capital, community capital section, the group felt that improving schools, K through 12, and adult education engagement was very critical. Finding ways to teach practical skills for leaders, how to read a budget, for example, was important. Strengthening neighborhood identity, people walking, talking face to face, and interacting in the neighborhood context, going back to the having more sense of community and preserving what is out there right now, going back to the asset concept of things. And the last one is broadening community involvement through the mayor's community summits that he's recently begun this year, or since his office. The East Side Summit, I'm sure, proved a lot of engagement and was a call for resident engagement. That was the mayor taking the leadership. Very soon next week, the mayor's call for a West Side Summit. So groups like AARP West Side and other groups are beginning to round up residents to bring issues to the forum and express their discontent or their content, and bringing leaders together and into a big listening session. So we felt that that needed to be broadened to include North Side, South Side, and other sectors of the city, and making it a sustainable process that that is involved every year. That's it for us.
What was your first idea? Didn't quite get that one.
Okay, yeah, it's not really clear, but it says improve schools K through 12 and adult education. I know, Pat.
Okay, it was the one after improving K through 12.
K through 12 and adult education.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, I'm going to jump out of order here. Yep, Graciela's table. Luis has to run, and we certainly want his ideas after that voter idea with student competition.
Our table for voter turnout, our three main ideas were that, number one, it should be easier to register to vote. Luis told us that we are the only democratic country in which voters are required to register themselves. In other democratic countries, it's the government's responsibility to make sure that we are voters. Voting should be supported by convenience of location and time. Some countries have Election Day as a holiday, There's a country that has 3 days of holiday for election. And our third point was that elections should be consolidated so that we're not voting for some things in May and some in November. And we learned that our city can actually request through the state to have our elections on the ballot at the time of state and national elections. For government accountability, we said that we wanted citizen access, easy citizen access to all city budget information. We want hard copies. We want it online. We want great graphics with maps of where the money is going. We want to know who is bidding, who's getting the bids, how much they're getting. We want to know the planning in advance for city projects that are on the table in various departments. All of that available to citizens. We want citizen access to meetings, meetings at times and places that it's convenient for people to attend. And we think, as did other people, that youth engagement is really important. And there's so many creative ways we can make that happen. I'm not even going to start. And our facilitator, Graciela, would you please fill in anything important that I left out?
I guess the other element was that government accountability also is connected to, obviously, voter turnout. That we came up with many examples, like when 100,000 people signed petitions to say no to PGA, and yet what the city government did was to ignore those 100,000 petitions, and then the next round was to say you're not allowed to petition, and PGA moved forward. And so we saw a lot of young people become very cynical and say, who cares? So we find many moments where community engages, and we continue to be ignored, and that's where we were saying follow the money, and it seems like where you follow the money is where the government seems to vote and not what community says. So one obviously is in direct connection to the other.
P.S. Our overriding theme was that we need free internet, that so many people don't have access to that. Like, oh, it's on the internet, oh, it's on cable. Well, we're not all there. And I'm going to pass the microphone to Luis because I think y'all were interested in him.
No, congratulations on all your work. That's all I'll say. And you have an opportunity to do something very unique here, I think, and I'm sure you're going to take advantage of it.